Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Squirrel Squadron. Now, I hope everybody has brought vegetables because I think that lots of you are going to want to throw things at me. And that's okay. That's encouraged and permitted. I'm in favor of productive conflict. So I have a nice, kind of controversial topic today that I think everybody has an opinion on, and lots of people disagree with me, which makes me very, very happy because I like it when people disagree, discuss, and figure out the right answer. So I'm willing to be convinced that I'm missing something and that I should think differently. And I hope all of you are thinking the same. So what you've come for, of course, is Kill the Kickoff meeting, which is one of my weekly events, always free, always on topics that affect both technology and non-technology people. And that's part of the Squirrel Squadron, which is my community of tech and non-tech people working together. If you wanted to go somewhere else, this would be a great time to leave. But if you're going to be sticking around here and you're going to be vigorously disagreeing with me, I'd like you to just put in the comments, what vegetable are you going to throw at me? Are you going to get a nice big juicy watermelon? I guess that's a fruit. Do you have a tomato? Do you have a sweet corn? Maybe you're in favor of killing kickoff meetings. So maybe you're going to do something nice like give me a cake. So what are you going to throw at me? That's my question for you. Can you stick that in the comments and maybe where you're going to throw it from so I know when to duck? Because I think I'm going to have lots of vigorous disagreement here. Let me just say a few preparatory words. The first is that this is being recorded, so if you have to disappear or something like that, it'll always be up. You can always find it at squirrelsquadron.com, thanks to the fantastically talented Laura that's now here on the screen. So you can always find squirrelsquadron.com, look at the events, look at the archive, and you can find the recording if you want to. And if you're watching on the recording, hello from the past. Hello, future. I hope your world is even better than ours. And that you have lots of opinions about kickoff meetings, and maybe you've eliminated them. That would make me very happy. I just want to say a few things about the squadron. It's free to join. It's my way of giving back. We have thousands of people around the world who are talking all the time about fascinating topics. We were just talking about how to make sure everybody in the organization is no more than 3 calls away from the CEO, and how to create that kind of informal network, that kind of informal communication. Might be something that some of you feel you get from kickoff meetings, but I claim that you don't. And we were also talking about Belvedere marketing. So actually alienating some of your users, alienating some of the people who might want to buy your product, being a very good marketing strategy. And my example for that I was just posting today was a driving license instructor who's driving around in a car. Of course, it's written on the outside, come to my driving school. But the driving school is called License to Thrill. So being thrilled to drive your car. Now, that sounds kind of terrifying if I'm a parent. I don't want to pay for driving lessons for my child so they learn to be thrilled in their car. I want them to be very bored and not to hit anything. But if I'm a kid, maybe I'm very excited. So I just thought that was very interesting marketing approach, and has a lot of application, for instance, to getting a budget for a project you want to do. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about on the forum. We have events coming up, including Ask Me Anything next week. That's always very popular. People ask provocative questions. Sometimes they throw things at me. Fortune says I'm frozen. Now that's got me a little bit worried. Laura, could you just check? Are we okay on LinkedIn? Is there a problem at Fortune's end? Is it everybody? And if others could also check, just make sure. I hope I'm there on your screen. I'm moving around on my screen, and I'm telling you lots of exciting things. So I hope it's working for others. Yeah, Fortune's saying again that I'm frozen on LinkedIn. Let me ask Laura to just give me a quick read. Can she see me? Are we working? How are we doing? Laura's nodding. Fortune, that might be at your end. You might try coming back in. You might try having a look on YouTube. Garrett says LinkedIn was frozen. Okay, well, let's blame LinkedIn. It's all their fault. I don't think it's something at us for us. Okay, Fortune, if you're having trouble, switch on over to YouTube, and we're going to assume that that's a LinkedIn problem. So hope that's working for Fortune, and I'll just actually respond to Fortune. I think this will wind up commenting everywhere. But I'll just say, hey, Fortune, in case Fortune can't see me, Fortune, try YouTube. LinkedIn isn't feeling so good. So we'll try to make sure we get everybody here because I want you all throwing these vegetables. I want you all disagreeing with me vigorously. So I was just saying that an event coming up next week, which will be on Zoom, that's a little more stable. We don't have to deal with freezing quite so often. That's going to be Ask Me Anything. So you can really bring any kind of question. After that, I'm going to be appearing virtually in Australia. So it's at a crazy time for UK people. Quite early in the morning, and US folks, but you can get up if you want to. But I'm going to be talking about tech radar and how you assess a tech team. So that's for an Australian group called the Product Circle. And of course, there'll be a recording, so you can catch that as well. And I'm doing a bit of a world tour. I think I'm going to be in Paris. That's at least something we're talking about. And then in New York, then in Berlin, and then in London. So I'm getting around all the major capitals, at least in the Western Hemisphere, and going to be appearing live on all kinds of different topics. So check out squirrelsquadron.com. That's down there somewhere where you can see all those upcoming events. Fantastic. Great. And right, so we have Laura, I think, weighing in to say, head on over to YouTube, which is very helpful. Thank you, Laura. Good stuff. So let me actually talk about our topic now, because I think this is so exciting, so controversial that we're going to have a really good discussion. Garrett says, how about Cape Town? Garrett, you want to host me? I'd love to come to South Africa. For instance, it's warm there, I hear. You guys are having summer, and we're getting cold and wet here in good old Britain. So Garrett, get in touch. I really mean it. I'd love to come down there and see you guys. Let me just tell you a story about a hopeless kickoff meeting, that I sat in and I thought, wow, I'm never going to get that hour back. So I have a client who's in, we're going to say investing. There's some form of investor in various kinds of companies. And they brought me in to help them with their technology. So within their investor company, they of course use a bunch of technology, and they wanted to improve that. They wanted to bring somebody in to change technology provider, and that person would give them new access to better data, better collaboration, all that kind of good stuff. And they turned up in the office of my client, and I was on the screen. So I was sitting here in my home in Frogholt, far away, and enjoying, I thought, a nice discussion at the beginning of their project, where they were going to introduce their ideas. They were going to introduce the things they were going to do. It was death by PowerPoint. And I bet a lot of you have been in kickoff meetings that are like this, where you get started, you think, wow, I have all this energy. I really want to do some stuff. And the first slide was all about the history of our company. And the next slide was all about who will be your account manager. And the next slide was about, I don't know, the company Christmas party or something. I had tuned out by that point, because what we wanted to talk about was the provisions and the terms on which we might work together, the new exciting projects and what order we might do them in. Are we going to do this one? It has a lot of value, but it has a lot of risk. Should we start with that one? Who might work on this one? What information do we need? There was a lot of very practical data that we could be collecting. And what we were mainly doing was learning about this provider and this particular company. And they had just shown up with a fairly dry PowerPoint presentation. Now, I hasten to add, just in case they're here, because the Squirrel Squadron is open to everybody, I don't blame them. I don't think they did a terrible job. I'm not saying that they're, and they actually have done a great job for my client. And they're an excellent partner, and they're doing some really good projects and getting started really well. So I think they made a good choice. But what I can't say is that starting with a kickoff meeting added anything meaningful to the conversation. Now, I know a bunch of you are going to, and by the way, I have a wonderful set of questions from all of you, which I'm going to go through. And I want you to nobody's thrown any vegetables yet. Why haven't you thrown any vegetables? So tell me what vegetables you're going to use and what questions you have and what things you want to argue about. You want to tell me I'm all wet, I'm all wrong. That's good. But I'm telling you about this particular kickoff meeting, which is prototypical. It's absolutely archetypal for kickoff meetings that I have been in, where the idea was somehow we would build relationships. Somehow we would understand each other better, and we would be able to collaborate better because we had a lot of background and a lot of context. And if any of you have been coached by me, and I know a lot of you have, you will know that I hate background and context. It's not helpful. It's really helpful to get the bits that you actually need. I don't really need to know the history of the company and when its Christmas party is, but it really would be useful to know where their office is and how to phone them. It would be really helpful to understand which of them is an expert in, say, SharePoint, so that I can phone the right person when I have a SharePoint question. That would be really useful, and I could get it in something that isn't a kickoff meeting. And so what I found was, as this group started working with my client, that the actual interactions where we got started on the projects were 100% more valuable, and they covered all the stuff that people claim they get done in kickoff meetings. In fact, better than this quite boring, quite sort of ritualized discussion, in which there was a lot of caution and a lot of feeling each other out and so on. When we actually got started working on something and had some useful and productive conflict, boy, we got a lot more done. So I'm going to stop there and invite comments and vegetables. So who wants to disagree with me and say, no, my kickoff meetings aren't like that? My kickoff meetings are absolutely wonderful. They're tremendous value. They're independently valuable. And, Squirrel, you're all wet. You haven't got the right information. So I'm going to pause for a minute, let somebody say that. And then if you don't, then I'm going to grab some questions and tell you some more stories. But please, one of you who disagrees with me, pipe up in the comments now that I'm not frozen, I hope, and tell me your experience with kickoff meetings. I assume that some of you are typing. You're going to get in trouble with Professor Squirrel if you're silent throughout this. By the way, if you're driving, please don't type anything. That almost goes without saying, but I've had 2 clients get into accidents trying to text me. So I'm very sensitive to this. Luckily, they were both fine, but I really, really don't want you to be doing anything when you're driving. Everybody else, I want to hear your comments. I'm going to give you another few seconds. If none, then I'm going to pick out some of the people who were quite vitriolic in the preparatory discussion, which, by the way, is on the Squirrel Squadron forum. So if you're on there, have a look at the questions, maybe identify your favorite one. Okay, so where's somebody who, oh, great, we have Donald here. Oh, wait, we have Garrett. Okay, Garrett, we're going to take you because you're here, and then we're going to look at Donald's helpful and provocative comment. Garrett, let's see if I can get him up there. Garrett says, maybe what I do is not a kickoff meeting. I call it a boardroom briefing. More details forthcoming. Okay, well, Garrett, I like the idea, but the challenge, just from the name, that worries me there is, what is a briefing? Do we really need a briefing? Now, there's a good form of briefing. There's the kind that I really like, which I advise in Agile Conversations, for example, with my co-author, Jeffrey. And that's one in which you lay out the freedoms and the constraints. So in this example I was giving, it might be, we're providing this kind of service to you. We've contracted for this, but, if you want us to change your data center, we're not going to do that. But we do maintenance of your services. That information about what we're free to do and what we're constrained in doing, and therefore then figuring out what the plan is for doing the work, that seems useful to me. That's a helpful briefing. And then I would want a back briefing as a result, where the group comes back and says, okay, now we've understood where our constraints are, what our freedoms are, and here's what we're going to do, way before they actually do it, so they can get feedback. That's actually starting on the project. That's actually starting on the work, whatever it is that you're going to be doing, whether that's building a new piece of software or implementing new IT tools or starting a new sales initiative or moving the office to a new country, whatever you're doing. That would feel comfortable to me. So I would like that if that's where you're going, Garrett. And please do put in your comments. I'm very keen to hear what this boardroom briefing is. But the thing I'd worry about is somebody would say, great, well, this boardroom briefing is a great opportunity for people who are very high up and not working on the project to tell everybody who they are and why they're important. And there's an awful lot of posturing and ritual activity at the kickoff meetings I've been at. Now, I don't think that's what Garrett's thinking, and I suspect he's going to tell us what he means. I'm on tenterhooks here. I really want to know. But if it were that, or somebody misinterpreted what Garrett was saying and said, yeah, great, we're going to have all the senior stakeholders in the room, and they're going to give a little speech, each one. I don't think that's so helpful. I don't think that really gets us anywhere. What I want to do is make sure there's something on the table that we're going to get done, that moves us ahead on the project, that gets us started on whatever it is we're going to do together. And I'm hoping that's what Garrett's going to tell us. So Garrett, thank you very much for that. Atul says, I had a good experience in the kickoff meeting as it provided info for the team. Atul, no argument. I'm in favor of info for the team. My question back to you is, why did you need a kickoff meeting? Why couldn't you have had, and I don't know, Atul, what it is that you do. I'm not even sure I'm saying your name right. But what I'm wondering is, could you have started on whatever it is? And let's suppose it's a technical thing. Could you have started with an initial setup of the tasks and deciding, how frequently you're going to deliver, or what users are going to be involved in testing? Now that, I think, would have given you lots of information. If we're going to say what users are going to be looking at the software, we better know who the users are, and we better find out where they are, and we better figure out what their phone numbers are. So we're getting a lot of information there, which would be really useful. If another case, if you're setting up a new marketing initiative, again, I don't know what part of the organization you might be in. If you're setting up new marketing, you might need to figure out what's our budget. You might need to work out who's going to be doing the creative, who's going to be setting the strategy. There might be lots of pieces of information that you could just get started on. And dumping information to people, I find, first of all, puts them to sleep. Second of all, it gets out of date very often. When you start doing the actual work, you say, oh, wait a minute. No, we can't do it that way because actually we haven't got access to the website. So putting new stuff on the website, hang on a minute, we can't do that. But what we can do is send out an email to all our users. So let's do that. Well, let's figure out who's in charge of email. See, we're doing that in the second meeting. Why didn't we do that in the first meeting? So that's my question back to you, Atul. I'd love to hear how that worked for you. Why couldn't you have started with whatever the second meeting was and do that? Garrett says he sells Outlook productivity. Fantastic. I don't know what that is, but it sounds interesting. Get the team together with their laptops, introduce the workflow processes, and let them implement. Now, I love that. That's fantastic. I don't know what Outlook productivity is, but anything that increases productivity is go in my book, Garrett. And actually starting on implementing sounds wonderful because you get real questions rather than kind of an abstract picture. Well, here's Outlook productivity. Here's the first step. Here's the second step. Here's who it benefits. Here's how great it is. Here's how super I am for having thought it up. Instead, you're saying, well, hang on a second. Here's how you actually use it. And here's how it would be beneficial to you or not, right? It'd be really good if you could find out in the first meeting that you've missold it and it's to the wrong people, or you don't have the right permissions or something else like that. So Garrett, if that's a boardroom briefing, it doesn't sound like a briefing to me. It sounds like actually starting on implementation. And that's where I'm suggesting you go. Atul says, kickoff meeting provides information on the project start, members, and what will be accomplished in the project, so everyone know what are the teams and what they do. Excellent. So you brought me, I did not pay Atul to make that comment, but I'm really, really glad Atul did. And I really hope I'm saying Atul's name right. I'm sorry if I'm not, please correct me. But I'm really, really glad you commented on that because I think you're completely wrong. And completely wrong in the sense that every one of those pieces of information are wonderful, and they can all fit in an email or a Slack message or a WhatsApp or something else, whatever your favorite thing is. I know the Gen Z folks, really like to use things that aren't email. You could put it on a whiteboard. I don't care where you put it. But every one of those pieces of information you could write down and someone could read it. Now, then they might have some questions and they might say, hey, wait a minute, that Atul guy, I'd love to work with him, but he's in a really different time zone. Why am I on Atul's team? This doesn't make sense. That's great. We could go deal with that in the first project meeting where I meet with Atul and I say, how late do you stay up, right? Is this something that can work? Can we get our time zones to align? Then we're solving an actual problem. But I don't need a meeting in which someone puts up a PowerPoint slide and tells me who the teams are and what we're doing. I can read that. Now, Atul may violently disagree, and so may some of the others of you. That's fantastic. We're having a discussion here, and I'm willing to change my mind if you're willing to change yours. But Atul, my question back to you is, why isn't that an email? Okay. Garrett says they leave the session with at least 3 time-saving tips implemented. I also did not pay Garrett to say any of these things. I want somebody to really disagree with me here and tell me I'm all wet and that there's something else that they could do. But Garrett's agreeing with me. Garrett is making my point for me because what he's doing is implementing his solution and giving people real value in the first session. And I imagine there might be further sessions where they try it for a while in the real world and they come back and say, hey, Garrett, it didn't work on Thursday like it did in the boardroom. That's great. We want to do that. But what we haven't done is waited on delivering value. Instead, we've got value in the first session. We've got value right away. And in Scrum terms, that might be planning the first Scrum and getting the first features in place and figuring out how to do the first demo. In sales or even customer service terms, it might be figuring out what's the training plan, how are we going to start answering phone calls, how are we going to teach people about the new feature. We can actually solve those problems instead of planning to set up to solve the problems. We could actually do it. Why not? Okay, so let me tell you another story. So I have a client. Now, this is a cautionary tale. This is a case where I didn't get all the value. So I'm telling you a story that's opposed to my point in the interest of being fair. So I have a standard policy when I do a certain type of project called technical due diligence. Details of it don't matter. I'm doing an assessment of a tech team. Doesn't really matter. But I have a standard policy of not having a kickoff meeting. And I put that in my introductory email. To a tools point, this is a case where I'm providing an introductory email and all the information is in there and I expect people to read it. The tool, I see you've responded. I'll come back to you in a second, but I just want to tell this story. So I sent this introductory email. It says, I don't do kickoff meetings. If you have any questions, phone me. And we got started and they gave me the information I needed. And we had the initial actual working phone call where we actually did some work together. Now, what I heard back later was that they were really surprised by how much I did, or rather by how little I did in that first session. They had a different expectation of how much investigation I would do and how I would engage with them and so on. And I didn't correct that. Now, the thing I would claim is that I don't need a kickoff meeting to correct that misunderstanding. It was my fault. I wasn't clear enough with them. The first meeting will be like this. This is what we'll cover. They had a different expectation. But what I should have done and have in fact done in my introductory email template is to make sure that I'm very clear on what they should expect there. Expect this, this, and this. If you're not clear, I want you to phone me. And another mistake I made is not prompting that discussion. So what I don't want anyone to walk away saying is Squirrel thinks that nobody should talk to each other. We shouldn't have conversations. We should just start working together. Absolutely nothing could be further from the truth. I wrote a whole book called Agile Conversations. I care about people having conversations and collaborating, believe me. I just think kickoff meetings are a terrible way to get that going. And what I should have done, and now try really hard to do better, is to create that collaboration one-on-one or in specific project-oriented meetings in another way when I'm doing this type of project. I avoid this miscommunication and confusion without needing to gather everyone. Because there's really only the couple of people who were involved in that first session who came back and said, Squirrel, we didn't cover this and that and the other. Where was that? So now I tell them explicitly in the email. And if I haven't heard from them, if they haven't come back and said, okay, now you're going to cover this and that, right? With an email or a phone call or something like that, then I do my very best to prompt them and to say, hey, hang on, I haven't heard from you. I want to make sure we're collaborating well. Why don't you phone me on what I call the squirrel phone? And so, this is my method. You don't have to copy my method. But, a lot of you will have forgotten this. You can pick up one of these things and push buttons and talk to Squirrel. Those are all the steps you need. You don't need a kickoff meeting. You don't need a WhatsApp. You don't need a Calendly invite. You don't need a carrier pigeon. You can just pick up the phone and talk to the person. And that's what I should have done when I heard silence. And the problem is that if I held a kickoff meeting, I still might have confused them just the same way. Because I didn't have in my mind, I need to set the expectations for this first working meeting. And having started with that and disappointed them, I kind of started on the back foot on the project. We got better in the end, and we're all fine now. But it was a place where you might think a kickoff meeting would help, and I claim it would not. So there's my second story. I got a third one, which is a little more uplifting, a little more successful. But I wanted to tell a failure story as well as a success story. Right. A tool says you also meet all the people involved in the project, team building and connecting with folks. So a tool, I'm just going to be relentless on this. You're making excellent points. You're making really good arguments for starting the project. And what I'd rather do, rather than have a special time for the meeting, rather than having a special time for team building and a special time for connecting, why don't I connect with them by doing the work? And I'm going to use Garrett's example since he's given us this beautiful example. I really want to learn about Outlook productivity from Garrett now. I don't know what it is, but it sounds exciting. But what I'm going to do when I'm in Garrett's boardroom is I'm going to be sitting there with my computer, doing whatever it is that Garrett teaches me to do, and talking to my colleagues and saying, hey, did you do this? What did step 3 make sense to you? Yo, Garrett, I don't understand how this works. And I'm going to be building those connections, meeting all the people. I bet Garrett sounds like a smart guy. I bet he might break us into groups. Maybe we'll work on, an advanced topic together, and you and me, Atul, we'd get to know each other because we're in a pair. I don't know if that's how it works, but that's the kind of thing you could do in the first project session where you're actually doing the work. If you're on the technical side, you're doing your first refinement session. You're defining your tickets and your tasks and how you're going to do your demos. You could do that in little groups and make sure that people learn. The thing I can't figure out is why you need a special meeting in which you specially do these things and then you apply that someplace else. Why not just start applying it? So that's my challenge. I would love to hear it from any of you. And Garrett says, to quote my friend, Alan Weiss, yes, he was on my podcast just last month, provide immediate value. Yes, that's exactly right. So what I want to do is start applying the value, giving the value, giving the results, rather than waiting around until some special thing happens, until I have permission, until I feel comfortable, until I've sort of performed the ritual. Because one thing I will say is a lot of this kind of activity has that feeling of ritual. And, I have a fantastic friend. I should have him on the podcast sometime. I've been on his, Andy Parker, who is a software anthropologist. He's literally learned ethnography and, studying people in villages and so on and writing down their habits in journals and things. Plus, he's a software developer. So it's a great combination. And he talks about the rituals that we have in software development, how a lot of them are actually not very useful. And it would be great to use only useful rituals. Some of them are really useful. I'm in favor of stand-up meetings, for example, once a day. Fantastic thing to do. Lots of teams outside software development do it. That's a ritual that I find useful when done well. But I can't figure out the point of the kickoff meeting ritual. It simply seems to be a opportunity for posturing, for positioning, for communicating a lot of implicit information. Why not do the explicit stuff? Why not offer the value, as Garrett says, quoting Mr. Weiss? Okay, so I'm going to turn to some of the questions. Now, my poor friend Fortune, I hope I've unfrozen for Fortune, and Fortune's found me on another platform or something. Don't know what's going on with LinkedIn. Maybe Laura could let us know. Is LinkedIn feeling better? How are we doing? We hope we're on all the platforms. But Fortune asked a whole series of great questions beforehand, and because Fortune was here and I was freezing for Fortune, I want to answer those, or at least as many as I can get to. Now these are quite supportive questions, so Fortune is as skeptical as I am. So maybe I'll pick one of these that's a little less polemical. Fortune says, why is it that many leaders will do anything but set one inspirational and purposive North Star, then support the organization towards heading there, adjusting as conditions require? Why won't they do that? Well, I think a lot of them are really trying. Let's give them credit. And what they tend to do is they kind of do what they've seen. They do what feels comfortable. They do what they've seen on TV. They do what they see politicians do. And those, politicians go on listening tours so they can be seen listening to the public. They might not actually be listening to the public. They might not actually be kicking anything off. They're cutting the cord, but the building never gets built. So they tend to do what they've seen, and they have a good intention, is my experience, that leaders do really try to set that North Star. I prefer Ursa Major. I could talk about that. I prefer a constellation, not just one star. But wherever you're going, whether it's a single point or a narrow direction, narrow options, support the organization towards going there is something they're trying to do. And I think a lot of people think kickoff meetings are a great way to do that. I just happen to violently disagree, because I think you can get to the results faster if you offer value. So Fortune, I hope that's helpful for your question, and I hope you're seeing me, or at least hearing me. I hope everything's getting through to you. Now, that was quite a supportive question. I want to get people who disagree with me, because I think that's a lot more fun. Donald says, how can you flush out misalignments ahead of engagement? Something that a decent kickoff event can help with sometime. Now, Donald is 100% right. This is very important, and nobody's brought this up yet, I think, that you want to figure out when people think the project is A, then somebody else thinks the project is B, because that's a way to make sure your project does not get to A or B or anywhere else, right? That's a train wreck in progress. So, for example, if we're building some software, and I have some clients who have exactly this problem. I was just meeting them before this, and they're not quite sure which users they're building for. Is it the top managers, the ones who want the reports and the kind of outputs and the revenue results? Is it the worker bees? Is it the people down at the bottom who are actually banging the keyboard, staying up till midnight? They're going to be getting a lot of productivity benefits from the new software. Or are they serving the people in the middle, the managers who need to make sure the worker bees have the right resources and the right tools and the right inputs and report up to the top management? Those are groups who actually are in opposition. Those people are not aligned because the folks at the top really don't care how hard the people lower down work. It's not a big issue to them as long as they get useful results and they can sell lots of things to their clients. And the workers might actually want more work. That's one thing they discovered is in this particular industry, being up late, working really hard is rewarded. It's seen as culturally valuable. Whether that's good or not, that's a misalignment with the mindset of this company bringing in their new software and with others who might, for example, the managers who want to say, let's have fewer worker bees, but get the same amount done. Having the worker bees have more work to do is not what they want. So we have different people with different wishes. And Donald says you can discover that in a kickoff meeting. Donald, I'd say that's very difficult to do. It is not impossible. I think if you had a really skilled facilitator who can bring out all the issues, who can cover all the topics and make sure that we're right on top of every issue, we're bringing in opposing views, we're making sure we agree on what important words mean so that we're having a useful dialogue. All of those kinds of things are, if you can do all that with a really skilled facilitator, you can get to those misalignments. You can find out where people have a different point of view about what they're trying to do. But I predict that if you actually started trying to do the work, you would find that out even more quickly because you'd show up, and this is in fact what happened to my client. They showed up with productivity enhancements, probably not unlike what Garrett's been describing. I still want to know what Outlook productivity is, but in their world, they're bringing productivity to a different product, to a different process. And they showed up. They might show up and say, "Great, fantastic new productivity," and nobody cheers. Like, okay, why aren't you cheering? Well, the managers are happy, but the individual workers are not. Why is that? And they discover that by actually doing it, by showing them, saying, we're going to teach you how to be more productive. We don't want to learn to be more productive. Hang on a minute. That's not what we expected. Now, you could have a theoretical discussion in the kickoff meeting and say, we think productivity is really important. How many people think productivity is important? Well, actually, most people are going to agree with you put that way. But if you show up with something that makes them more productive, and it means that they can't show their colleagues how hardworking they are, then they actually give you a response. There's a great similar study. You ask people abstractly what they'll pay for certain types of medicine, particularly life-saving medicine, the kinds of things we used during the pandemic that really, the antivirals and things that really help save people's lives. So the study was about understanding who would pay what for this type of medicine. And what you find, of course, it's not a very surprising study, is that when you ask people abstractly, if you had this disease and you needed to pay, what would you want to pay? Well, they don't want to pay so much. They're willing to pay a lot, but they won't pay tens or hundreds of thousands in their local currency in order to save their lives. In the actual situation, they're willing to pay much more. Now, again, what I want is reality. What I want is actual value or the lack of it, right? I want to find out really quickly the thing I'm offering does not give value to the person I'm hoping to give it to. Well, let me find that out by actually working with them, and I'm going to get a lot more truth. Just like I don't want to infect people to find out what they would be willing to pay for medicine, but if I ask people who actually have the disease, I'm going to find out a lot more about their willingness to pay, about their ability to pay, about their interest in, say, having public health care, which would make it zero cost, something like that. I'm going to find out from the actual situation much better. So, Donald, I hope that was helpful on your question. I'm going to keep going because I have a nice stack of other topics. Let's see. Jeff says, when do you build rapport without the kickoff meeting? Well, Jeff, that's a great question. We covered it a little bit, but let me say more. Because building rapport is super important. You want people collaborating and interacting and working together. And I see that in very few kickoff meetings. Now, Garrett has his idea of a boardroom briefing, I think he called it, which I love. That sounds great. And I was imagining that Garrett probably has some collaboration there. He's teaching them some tool. He's giving them opportunities. I bet he's building rapport with them by showing them the great results they can get. And he's building rapport, I suspect, certainly I would, by breaking people into groups and saying, can we work together on this? And how about if we get started on that? And maybe you're going to be collaborating next week on the project, so let's do a test project together. That kind of thing you can do in your initial project work. So it could be you meet all in one room, but you split up and circle around and make sure people are collaborating and working together. It could be that you actually say, okay, you developers, you're going to be working over here, and you user feedback people, you're going to be going out and seeing the users. So why don't you go do that and then report back, right? That would be a way for those folks then to have a discussion and to build the rapport. So I think a kickoff meeting is frankly a kind of lazy way to get out of this. Then you think, oh, if I just put people all in one room and I throw some PowerPoint slides at them and have some senior people say some nice words, suddenly we'll have rapport. That isn't what happens for me. That's not what I see in my clients. That's not what I see in my work. And that's not what I create in the sessions that I have, because I get people working together in these small groups, reporting back to the larger group, circling around and interacting with each other. And that's harder work, right? I have to think about how to do that. I spent most of the afternoon figuring out how to do that for one of my clients that I was just meeting with. And I continue to work hard at that. So if you want to be lazy, have a kickoff meeting, because it'll kind of look good. And maybe you'll get some rapport, but I don't predict you'll get as much output. You won't get as much benefit as if you put in some effort, come up with some ideas. And you know what? If you're not sure what ideas to try, ask on the forum. Ask me, ask the thousands of people who've done this in their experience. And, we get advice from around the world when people ask questions like that. So, Jeff, I hope that's helpful. Happy to give more ideas in that direction. What else do we have? Love more comments live. I'm looking at my list here and taking some live and some pre-questions that we've got. So I'm just going to keep going with those. Let's see. Great. I like Noah's. And Noah's a very smart guy. No, I'd really like to see you when I'm in New York. So let's see if we can work that out. Noah says, how do you look someone in the eyes and get buy-in for key dates without a kickoff meeting? Okay. Now, this is a really tough one, because what Noah is pointing to is that you're asking people to put a lot of trust in each other when they give dates, when they say, I'm going to finish this, but I'm dependent on you to give me the resources, the budget, the tools, the access, whatever it is, the feedback that would allow me to finish the project. And he says very positively, very correctly, one of the things that's very important for that is looking people in the eyes. When you look folks in the eyes, literally physically look at them, ideally in the same room, you do create an increased trust. It's much easier to say to somebody on the screen, oh yeah, I'll try to get that done, and not really mean it. Whereas when you've shaken their hands, you've talked about their kids, you've seen them eat lunch together with you, all of those sorts of rituals, back to my friend Andy Parker, all of those rituals increase trust. And those are great things to do. In no sense am I saying that we shouldn't do those things, that we shouldn't commit to key dates, that we shouldn't look each other in the eyes. The thing I'm wondering about is, why do we need a kickoff meeting for that? I think it's actually a poor environment for it, for a couple of reasons. One is, and somebody was asking about, do you just do introductions in a kickoff meeting? Well, if that's all you do, you're not creating an awful lot of trust. There's not a lot of looking in each other's eyes and making a commitment and feeling morally bound to keep to that commitment, morally bound to let the person know if you're not going to keep it. Not a lot of that happens when all you're doing is introductions, PowerPoint, dumping a lot of information, as we've talked about here so far. Now, you could have a different type of kickoff meeting, and you could have one that's very date-focused and commitment-focused. And there you're starting to get out of what I think of as a traditional kind of lazy person's kickoff meeting. So, no, I think you're right that one type of session that could be more productive, here I might be changing my mind a little bit, is something where you're very focused on making commitments and understanding what goes into them. Of course, one of the things is you might commit to building feature A, and the other guy thinks feature A is actually features A, B, C, D, Q, and X. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, I committed to this, but not to what he thought. That's where I think you might get into significant trouble if all you do is say, okay, we've made a timeline here. Does everybody agree? Let's all look into each other's eyes and commit. So that I would not think would be very successful. But I can imagine a type of session which might feel a bit like a Scrum refinement or a sprint planning session or something like that in the tech world. And I know salespeople also set quarterly goals, and there's other processes that folks use. Some kind of objective setting for some period. I could think that could be a productive initial session. But actually, the danger in that one, as I think about it, is that I do want that to be grounded in real work. I want that to be started with some real foundation in what people are actually doing and why. Because if you have just a sort of abstract opinion, oh yeah, we should be able to do that in a month, that's very different from saying, I have listed out with you collaboratively, looking in your eyes, here are all the different tasks that are going to go into that project and how we're going to have to do them together. And when I have to wait for you and you have to wait for me, and gosh, that really sounds like 6 months, not 1 month. That's actually, I think, doing the work. That's actually doing a planning session. And that I don't think is a bad idea. And if you wanted to call that a kickoff meeting, okay, fine. We're just going to disagree about what we call it. I'm going to call it a planning session. I'm going to call it a commitment session. I'm going to call it sprint planning, refinement, any of those types of terms that you might like to call it. OKR setting. Somebody said North Star setting. What's our overall objective? All of that kind of stuff, I think, would qualify as a useful initial session in which you're getting real work done. But then that actually kind of is the opposite of what I'm thinking of as this kind of unproductive, lazy kickoff meeting. Okay, I hope that's helpful. I'd love comments from those of us live here, but we have tons more, both live and in my queue here. Great. Jenny has a fantastic question. She says, has the kickoff meeting risen in popularity alongside remote and hybrid working? Well, here I'll provoke even more of you just to be annoying, and also because I think you need provoking, and that is, I think remote and hybrid working has led to a lot of people being very, very lazy. And I don't simply mean that they kind of sit at home and play video games, although that happens some too. What I mean instead is when we might have really considered what goes into a meeting, what cost is there in it? When everybody's in their pajamas, you don't think that it's that big a deal. So let's call another meeting and have everybody chat some more. And half of them will have their screens off and actually be trying to do something else. I have a client who's terrible with this, always fighting against it. And will be distracted and it won't be productive for them. And I can't know it because they're on the screen. But I don't have to know it either. And I can pretend I don't, and I can pretend I'm being productive. So I think that, yes, it has, I think, kickoff meetings and other lazy substitutes for real work have increased. And I see that more in my clients. And I see much more instances where people don't have the kind of accountability for the outcomes of meetings or software projects or new marketing initiatives or new products they're going to introduce, any of that kind of stuff. The accountability is diminished because there's not somebody you might run into in the hall who's going to say, yeah, that thing, why didn't we get it on Friday? There's a lot less informal interaction that creates accountability. And so we have to be more intentional about it. And that's what I think it was Jeff I was telling before. You need to be more intentional about creating the rapport in your initial interactions. You need to be more intentional about creating the accountability to be sure your project is functioning. And the opposite of that, of course, is being lazy. And I think we got way too much of that. Okay, so I hope I've annoyed even more of you, and maybe I'll annoy you into arguing with me here. Let's see. Bill, I think I've answered your question about better or never kickoffs. I'm never, but carefully defined. So I hope that's helpful. Let's see. Tom has a very long comment. You have to meet people where they are, not where you'd like them to be. He says, I found I can Trojan horse, in other words, smuggle in better methods in under the meeting named Kickoff, or use the requirements meeting to identify incoherent and uncertain requirements. But I've done this in a job. It's very different as a consultant. Aha, okay, here's a place where I think Tom might be having some challenges. I don't seem to get hired to be difficult, even if it's valuable. Tom, I only get hired to be difficult. As you can tell from this session, I am quite a contrarian and don't agree with people, and I'm quite happy to provoke them. And I don't mind if I make a recommendation, my client doesn't follow it, but has a better idea. That is a great outcome, and I sell that to people. So, Tom, I think what you might have here is a mindset challenge, and I'd encourage this for everybody. If your mindset is, I want to be friends with everyone, I want to make sure that everyone is comfortable and they're all feeling happy and they're all getting what they expect, and they're all, we have great camaraderie. When I am working with a new leadership team or CEO or someone like that, and they say, Bob and Tom, they get on so well. There's never any arguing. They can finish each other's sentences. They really understand each other so well. No conflict ever. I think, wow, Bob and Tom are really having some problems. Bob and Tom are not cooperating well, because what you look for is productive conflict. You look for discomfort, because people who are really comfortable don't do anything new. They don't keep up with the times. They don't come up with a new idea that beats the competitor. What they do is the same thing they did yesterday because they're comfortable, because it's easy. And I could tell you stories of loads and loads of hundreds of my clients who have engineers or product people or marketers or customer service folks who have just got into the mode of turning the crank. And Tom, I worry a little bit that might be what's happening to you. And I'm being provocative by saying that to you. So I would, Tom, look for ways to be more difficult because it's actually greater value. And I certainly see that that's valuable in my consulting practice. My clients are happy that I'm difficult in general. They're maybe not always that comfortable with it on the spot, but over time, they find that being provoked in that way, even if they don't agree with me, is more helpful. So I would cancel your kickoff meetings. That's what I would do. And see if you don't have to smuggle in your results, but see if you can actually produce them. Alex says, when the agenda is just to meet everyone, I think you're just wasting time. He says he agrees with that. But isn't the solution to set a better agenda? Well, I think we've kind of explored that a bit. And I'll say this. If you set an agenda which involves actually doing the work, I don't think you're doing a kickoff meeting anymore. It's suddenly morphed into your first productivity session of the boardroom briefing that Garrett talked about. The sorts of things that I've described, where you actually get some work done, where you actually get going with the project. That would be my agenda. And if, you call that a kickoff meeting, and in that agenda, you actually deliver some value, you get some results, you find out you're all wet and you're misaligned, as we've talked about. Those are all very useful things to do. And that might be a helpful agenda to have. But then, are you really doing a kickoff meeting? That would be the puzzle I'd pose back to you. Let's see. So I think we've covered all the questions that are in the backlog and all the ones that are live. So Alex says 100% answered. Great. All right. Glad to do that. So ask me some more. Bug me with more questions. But if nobody has any, then I'm just going to tell a story. So throw your questions in if you have more. This is what this is for. I love debate and discussion and disagreement. Productive conflict is one of the values of the Squirrel Squadron, and certainly of the Squirrel. So I'll pause for a moment, see if there are more questions, and then I'm going to close with a more uplifting story, one where killing the kickoff meeting was really productive. Oh, we got another from Garrett. Let's see. I find it useful to let people create their productivity improvement project identity. Excellent. All right. We're going to have personas here, e.g. super focused Mary, relaxed Paul, etc. in the first meeting, and explain why. Fascinating. So Garrett, I'm gathering that you kind of teach people to improve their productivity. Great. I think that's super. A lot of people could use that. And you ask them to define who they are, kind of what's their persona. That's really interesting. People do this, of course, in marketing, where they want to define, garrulous Garrett, who has a lot to say, so we want to market to Garrett in a certain way, or soporific squirrel, who's always, kind of bored and quiet, and so we want to build up a certain piece of software that means he doesn't have to talk to people. That wouldn't be me. That wouldn't be this squirrel. But those kinds of personas are very helpful for understanding abstractly a group of users. You're saying you use it individually for people in the room. That's really interesting. And I wonder if you then apply that. If you have super focused Mary, maybe you're going to teach Mary a particular technique that's really going to help her. Whereas relaxed Paul is going to need something, I don't know, that pokes him in the head and says, don't be relaxed. You got a meeting in an hour. Not sure how that works. Encourages discussion, helps mutual understanding, alignment with project goals. Not going to argue with that. Garrett, if that's working, I don't object. And again, I would claim that you might call that a kickoff meeting, but I think Garrett is getting the work done. Garrett is starting on defining the project. What is he going to help people with? What features do they need? What does Garrett need to adjust in his work in order to make them more productive? That seems like you're starting the work to me. Doesn't seem like an abstract kickoff meeting where you just meet people. Okay, so let me finish here with, these are great questions. I've really enjoyed them. You guys are a super group as always. I really love the squadron and working with you guys. I'm going to give you one more example, which is a client that I just got started working with recently. And I was in the taxi on my way to see them. And I had not figured out what I was going to do in the first session. I carefully had not called it a kickoff session. I said, this is a working session. We're going to solve your problem. We're going to get to a result. And what I did with them, not unlike what Garrett is describing, he says, I got it. Good. I'm glad I did. Not unlike what Garrett's describing is I said, I want to reify, and I'll put that here in the comments just so people know it's an unusual word. If any of you are Marxists, you might have heard Mr. Marx using this term. I use it slightly differently, but reification or reify is the verb. And reify, yes, I'm spelling it right. So that concept of reification means taking something very vague and unclear and kind of all over the place. It's kind of a cloud of ideas and starting to put it into buckets. And I said, I don't know what these guys really want to do. It's really not clear to me. So I'm not going to plan for the, it was a 2-hour session we'd set aside. I'm not going to plan for the 90 minutes after the first half hour. In the first half hour, I'm just going to get them to agree on what the important words mean and what the buckets are. What are we trying to accomplish? We came up with 4. We had a couple little ancillary ones. I had come in with 3 and they said, your 3 are right, but you're missing these. But we got really clear on what the outcomes were. And then it became very clear to me on the spot. I had to do this on the fly immediately. I couldn't have planned for it. I wouldn't have put it in the agenda. I certainly wouldn't have planned for it in any kind of kickoff meeting. And I said, what we really need here is a story. What we need is to take these vague clouds, and now we've got them kind of in buckets, but what we need is to get a timeline on it. So we're going to do this thing first, and then we're going to do that one, and then either this is going to happen or that's going to happen, and then the end is our customer pays us lots of money. It was clear what the end of the story was going to be, but then we needed the path to actually getting there was not at all clear. And it's still not clear. We've been having frequent sessions to refine this, but what I didn't do is come in saying, I know the personas, if I use Garrett's notion, I know what people are going to be asking me and telling me and bringing up. I forgot to put reify up on the screen. Let me do that so you guys can see how to spell it. What I'm not going to do is come in with a prescription and an approach that I'm going to tell everybody that because I don't know where they want to go. And I discovered that on the fly, and it was hard work. I was exhausted when I came home. I had to just fall asleep for a few hours because I had done hard work. But the hard work is hugely paid off. That skeleton is really helping them move forward in a way they haven't been able to before. It's really making a big change, big difference for them. So I just strongly encourage you to think about how you could work harder. How could you do more than the kind of automatic, simple, frankly, lazy approach of saying, we'll just get the people in a room, we'll have them all meet each other, we'll put up the names and the kind of overall goals of the project, and everybody will kind of absorb the information slowly. Send it in an email beforehand if there's any fixed static information you can share. Get people building rapport, doing activities together, working on projects, doing the actual work, and you're going to find out where all the misalignments are. You're going to find out where all the difficulties are much, much more quickly than you will with a simple, quote unquote, kickoff meeting. All right. I don't see any other comments. I'd love for you to add some more. Head on over to squirrelsquadron.com down there somewhere. and join the forum if you haven't, because I'd love to continue talking about this. I've shifted my ideas a little bit. I really appreciated some of the ideas and suggestions, so I'm going to fold that into my work. And I hope I've given you some provocative and challenging ideas. That was my goal. All right, everybody, have a wonderful. Oh, Garrett's going to give us one more word here. He says, a Catawampo travels in a purposeful manner towards a vague destination. Garrett, that's going on the forum for sure as a word of the week. I've got to understand that word better, but absolutely, Catawampo, figuring out where you're going as you're going sounds like a great thing to be doing. All right, wish you all good Catawampoing. I'd love to see you next week at the Ask Me Anything and in my world tour when I'm talking to Australians in a couple weeks on Tech Radar, when I'm in New York, Berlin, London, maybe Paris. I'd love to see all of you. Information, again, is on squirrelsquadron.com. Have a fantastic day. Bye, everybody. Hey, you didn't go anywhere. That's good.
Stop the recording.
Oh, yes. Oh, I don't have to on here. I didn't end the stream.